True, profound healing will remain unattainable until one dares to face a fundamental truth concerning their mother. This is the key to liberation that many seek but fail to find. Countless volumes of wisdom, hours spent in therapists' offices or deep dives into meditative practices, none of this will bring complete relief if this hidden truth remains buried under layers of self-deception or unconsciousness. Until then, an unseen part of the soul will continue to slowly but surely bleed, draining one's vital forces. This wound, invisible yet gaping and perpetually open, remains a source of deep discomfort. It subtly yet powerfully shapes every choice a person makes, permeates all their relationships, determines the intonation of their voice, and even their deepest conceptions of self and worth. The great thinker Carl Jung profoundly warned humanity, everything that remains outside of consciousness inevitably repeats in life as an inexorable fate. And this fate particularly enslaves subtle, sensitive natures when it is woven from invisible threads, imperceptible influences, or unacknowledged aspects connected to the mother image. This is the invisible burden a person carries. One can change geographical coordinates, learn a new language, or drastically alter their professional field. A person might start a family, raise children, and build an outwardly flawless and orderly life. But if the internal image of the mother continues to dominate their own intuitive impulses, dictating how to perceive the world, how to react to events, how to express love, then it is with this internal essence that the most crucial dialogue must take place. We are not talking about the real, physical mother, but about her symbolic embodiment, about that matriarchal figure who still resides in the depths of consciousness, echoing with perhaps never-spoken judgments, unmet expectations, burdensome silence, or hidden accusations. And most importantly, this internal figure has been subconsciously accepted as an undeniable and absolute truth, never questioned. This text aims to deeply reveal the essence of that unseen image, which likely unconsciously influences human existence. This is not a path strewn with hatred or reproach, but rather a journey toward genuine reunification with one's own soul, with the very core of one's self, a process sometimes accompanied by pain. For there is a first, challenging but fundamental truth. The image of the mother, even if her physical presence has long vanished, even if she has passed away, or communication has ceased for decades, continues to exist within a person. Her influence manifests in decisions not made, dictated by a fear of disappointment. It is felt in words that were swallowed so as not to appear ungrateful. It is present in the guilt that arises when daring to choose a path different from what she might have approved. Carl Gustav Jung termed this phenomenon the mother complex. However, this concept extends far beyond dry psychoanalytic theory. It is rather a living, dynamic emotional structure residing in the depths of the human psyche. It represents a collection of memories, perceptions, feelings, and enduring beliefs deeply rooted in the soul long before the individual developed the capacity for conscious choice. What then is the most insidious and dangerous aspect of this complex? It lies in the fact that to maintain its powerful influence, it absolutely does not require the physical presence of the real mother. The essence is not in the mother's personality itself, but in the image a person has formed of her. This image can be idealized, fear-inducing, represent a desired but unreal ideal, or be someone a person has grown accustomed to defending, even if she once caused them pain. Likely, during upbringing, a person was instilled with the belief that feeling anger towards their mother was unacceptable, that the true path lay in acceptance, forgiveness, and forgetting past hurts. However, Jung did not advocate for forgiveness. His primary message was to see her not only as a specific person but also as a powerful symbolic figure, as an archetypal force that actively shapes both the collective and individual psyche of humanity. Until a person turns their gaze inward and confronts the image of the mother hidden in the depths of their own self, they will inevitably encounter the same suffering projected onto other figures in their life. Interacting with partners whose expectations sometimes seem an unbearable burden, with friends whose judgmental opinions cause discomfort, or with authority figures whose presence constrains and paralyzes, a person unconsciously seeks echoes of the unconditional love they did not receive from their mother, that longed-for approval that never materialized, or that warm embrace they so lacked in childhood. However, the harsh reality is this: surrounding people, no matter how close they may be, cannot fill those gaps or heal those wounds that the individual themselves refuses to confront, refusing to accept and process their internal conflicts. True healing begins the moment a person ceases their endless search for the mother image in the external world, recognizing the futility of this pursuit. It occurs when a deep understanding dawns. The gaping void felt within is not a bottomless chasm that urgently needs to be filled from outside, but rather a sacred inner space that requires not filling, but recognition, acceptance, and contemplation. It is for this reason that many people still feel trapped by invisible chains, remaining in a perpetual snare. Their search for freedom is directed outward, into realms where there are, in reality, no external prison walls, while they completely forget to turn their gaze inward to the internal cell they unknowingly carry within themselves, acting as their own wardens. How many times has a person felt unable to be themselves, authentic and sincere, simply because they sensed or knew their mother would not approve of such a display of individuality? And how many times have they had to suppress their own pain, stifle deep suffering, just to preserve an idealized or accustomed image of their mother in their mind, even if it required sacrificing their own truth? Finally, how many years has a person spent their life tirelessly trying to earn her love and recognition, even though they have long reached adulthood and may be significantly distant, both physically and emotionally, from their childhood home? Carl Gustav Jung demonstrates that the mother figure as an archetype is not merely the woman who gave birth, but a fundamental essence embodying both the power of creation and the threat of destruction. The mother appears as both womb and abyss, light and shadow. When this archetype is not integrated, it can transform into an emotional prison. The image of the mother then becomes not only the one who nurtures, but also the one who engulfs. Such a state is often felt as a mixture of love and guilt, attachment and fear. Those who experience this realize they are not alone. This is the reality for millions of emotionally deep, sensitive, introverted people carrying quiet wounds within them. These individuals learned early in life to be obedient, to be loved, to please, to be valued, and to care, to simply exist. However, a crucial question arises: is it possible to love one's mother and yet be free from her influence? What if true love for her is not protecting her feelings, but recognizing that she herself was a prisoner of something greater? For before she became someone's mother, she was a girl. Before she caused pain, she herself was wounded. Perhaps she did the best she could with the resources she had, but this in no way negates the pain experienced. It is here that a fundamental shift in understanding occurs. When a person comprehends that the task is not to change or confront her, but to heal the unseen connection that binds them to an image no longer serving their true essence, that is when their authentic journey begins. This is a journey inward, to know the mother living in one's own consciousness, to speak with her, to shed unshed tears, to say what was never said. This journey is not for vengeance, but for the attainment of freedom. Carl Jung, an eminent thinker, once expressed a profound thought: the life that remained unlived by parents has the most significant impact on their surroundings, and this is especially pronounced in the destinies of their children. It is entirely possible that a person finds themselves living not their own story, but their mother's life. Such an individual may unconsciously carry her pain, repeat her silence, or react to the world guided by her fears. Perhaps for them, the moment has come to break this cycle. A significant question arises: is this person ready to come face to face with this invisible mother who lives within them? Are they ready to stop being a child whose efforts are directed at rescuing, pleasing, or constantly proving their worth, and instead become a mature adult who consciously chooses to live their unique story? If the answer to this question is affirmative, then one should take a deep breath. For this journey does not promise to be easy, but it will be truly their own, and ultimately it may become precisely what that person's soul has awaited for many years, the freedom to be whole and authentic. Next, we will delve deeper into the archetype of the Great Mother, an ancient, powerful force present not only in each individual's personal history, but also deeply rooted in the collective unconscious of all humanity. In this context, it will be explored why a specific person's mother was never just their mother in the narrow sense, and how this profound realization can open doors to the most radical and comprehensive personal transformation. An individual's mother was never merely the woman who raised them. She is far more ancient. Her roots extend back through centuries. She resides not only in their biography, but also in the very architecture of their soul. Many people get lost at this stage of their journey, trying to resolve their personal pain solely through rational means, when in reality they are confronting an archetypal symbol that encompasses and pervades all of humanity. Carl Jung, an eminent thinker, termed this phenomenon the Great Mother, a powerful, all-encompassing force that manifests through a person's biological mother but is not limited to her. The feeling that a parent continues to control an individual's life, even at a significant distance, even after her passing, is, in fact, nothing more than the unconscious weight of this ancient archetypal image. Thus, the attachment is formed not merely to a series of memories, but to a fundamental ancestral force that still awaits its full comprehension. Throughout human history, from the earliest times, the image of the mother has consistently appeared in various narratives, mythologies, religious teachings, dreams, and works of art. She appears in the guise of Isis and Kali, Mary and Medea. She symbolizes the fertile earth that grants life and is simultaneously the embracing and engulfing dark abyss. She embodies the goddess capable of giving life and the sorceress who condemns to imprisonment. It is this profound duality that often confuses and paralyzes many people. This happens because from childhood, a person learns to perceive their mother as something sacred, unquestionable, almost divine. And when her real actions do not correspond to this idealized image, be it her absence, suffocating care, manipulation, or emotional detachment, something within the personality irrevocably breaks. However, how can one blame what is considered sacred? How can one dare to defy a goddess? As a result, pain is suppressed. A person begins to rationalize it, imbue it with spiritual meaning, forgive prematurely. Efforts are made to understand the mother's situation, to accept that she perhaps did everything within her power. All these attempts may have real grounds, but the deepest truth which the individual's subconscious carefully preserves in silence is that they were deeply wounded. The main difficulty lies in the fact that the deep internal wound no longer remains merely a distant memory from the past. It becomes firmly ingrained in a person's very system, permeating their relationships, shaping self-esteem, generating fear of making mistakes, causing difficulties with trust, and provoking panic at the slightest hint of rejection. A person sometimes does not even realize that they unconsciously reproduce the same dynamics when encountering new faces and finding themselves in different life scenarios. This repeats again and again and again. The reason lies in the fact that as long as the mother archetype remains distorted within an individual's inner world, their life will inevitably revolve around this all-consuming shadow. As an illustrative example, consider the story of Eleanor, a 52-year-old woman who dedicated her entire life to working as a caregiver. From childhood, she was taught that her highest duty was service to others. She was told that thoughts of her own needs were a manifestation of selfishness, and refusal, or the word no, was a sign of cruelty. Her mother, a strict Catholic, took pride in her silent suffering and self-sacrifice. Eleanor, following these dictates, married young, had children, and tried to do everything right. However, today, sitting in the peaceful quiet of her living room, after a full day of caring for her grandchildren and bedridden mother-in-law, she feels an inexplicable, oppressive emptiness. This is not merely physical exhaustion, but rather a deep sorrow for something that never materialized in her life, and this feeling is not connected to her current circumstances. She realizes that she has never truly lived for herself, and even attempts to consider changes evoke a sharp sense of guilt and pervasive fear. Her mother's voice, like an echo, still sounds in her ears. It's not that she doesn't love her mother, but within herself she never allowed herself to become anyone other than someone who serves others. This is precisely how the principle of this archetype operates, shaping a person's entire life. Consider the case of Ricardo, a 41-year-old man. He has established himself as a respected and highly successful professional in his field. However, despite all his achievements, in every victory he experiences a bitter aftertaste, as if constantly fleeing something unseen. His daily life is dominated by anxiety and internal tension, and he struggles immensely to truly relax. In interpersonal relationships, he often feels immature, like a child. His behavior oscillates between a continuous search for approval from others and complete self-isolation. The roots of this condition can be traced to his childhood. His mother was a domineering, overly protective woman. From the age of 10, she instilled in him that he was the man of the house. Even now, as an adult, Ricardo feels an overwhelming urge to protect everyone and everything, but the paradox is that no one takes care of him, nor does he know how to care for himself. His emotional compass was calibrated by external benchmarks, dependent on the needs and expectations of others, and now, on the threshold of maturity, he agonizingly asks himself, "Who am I really when I'm not trying to please someone?" Such examples are by no means exceptions. The stories may change, but their underlying essence remains constant. It is a soul trapped by a distorted image of the Great Mother. And the most tragic aspect of this situation is that victims of such captivity often continue to feel ungrateful, flawed, and guilty for daring to express their pain. For them, expressing these feelings seems tantamount to betrayal. However, Carl Jung clearly stated, true healing is achieved neither by idealizing the mother nor by hating her. Healing occurs when a person begins to perceive her as a symbol. This means acknowledging that behind the flesh and blood woman lies an ancient archetypal force that requires reintegration into the psyche. Why is this so critically important? Because until the image of the mother is perceived with clarity and without distortion, a person will unconsciously project their own power, creativity, and autonomy onto her. Even at the age of 35, 50, or even 70, they will continue to behave like an emotionally immature child. They will constantly await external permission to live fully. They will avoid any conflicts for fear of potential retribution. And they will continue to sacrifice themselves in the name of love. However, love that demands the soul as a sacrifice is not true love. It is merely a painful repetition of an old trauma. Jung asserted that the archetype of the Great Mother is two-faced. She is capable of both healing and inflicting suffering. She both gives and takes. When this archetype is integrated, it manifests as the wisdom of intuition, a source of creativity and a nurturing force. But when it is suppressed or distorted, it transforms into total control, paralyzing fear and numbness. This is why most people exist, vacillating between two extremes. Either they idealize their mothers, venerating them as untouchable saints while suppressing all their anger, or they demonize them entirely, remaining in perpetual conflict. Neither of these paths leads to healing, as both essentially remain a prison. The only path to liberation is integration. The question of integration is crucial to understanding deep psychological processes. It means, first and foremost, accepting one's mother as a fully human person, with all her strengths and vulnerabilities, her merits and shortcomings. This implies an awareness of her unique experiences and profound sufferings, which her descendants may never know, as well as her own life paths laid out long before their child's arrival. However, integration also requires allowing oneself to feel one's own emotional wounds. This means giving voice to accumulated grief, repressed anger, and finally embracing that inner child who yearns for genuine emotional acceptance, regardless of a person's age. If in the past there was no opportunity to express vulnerability in the relationship with the mother, this space for healing still remains open. And if a person persistently denies this need, it will find bypasses for its manifestation. It will become an invisible saboteur of personal aspirations, undermine interpersonal relationships, and even manifest as physical ailments. Symbolically, the mother image is deeply intertwined with the nourishing earth, with the profound layers of intuition, and with the continuous cyclical nature of existence, both physical and spiritual. When people become detached from this internal mother archetype, they lose connection with all these fundamental aspects of existence. Then, an unquenchable thirst for total control awakens within them. They strive to avoid any form of emotional pain, attempting to rationalize every phenomenon, relying exclusively on logic. Gradually, the capacity for subtle perception is lost. Life becomes confined to the rational mind, while the emotional core, the heart, becomes walled off behind impenetrable barriers. Ultimately, an unfillable spiritual void arises, which nothing can satisfy. This state is akin to a nameless, quiet suffering, a silent scream of the soul that no one hears. Do you feel an inner calling? Perhaps now is the opportune moment. Perhaps something deep within you is exhausted by the burden of guilt, from the weariness of following in others' footsteps or fulfilling expectations that were once shaped by your mother. Perhaps you are ready to embark on creating your unique narrative, and for this, there is no need for open confrontation with the parental figure. It is enough to simply accept her true essence, see her as she is, and then release these attachments. This act is the most difficult, yet simultaneously the most liberating. That is why such a significant journey cannot be undertaken alone, because a person's inner world is like an intricate labyrinth, and many lose their way trying to overcome ancestral traumas or heal emotional wounds related to maternal influence through mere speculative reasoning or superficial intentions. This path, conversely, urgently requires a clear structure, systematic practice, and unwavering perseverance. It is not a speculative concept, but a living, applied practice. It is a daily ritual that helps an individual reconnect with their true self, reformat ingrained emotional patterns inherited from the parent, and form a new personality marked by greater harmony, inner freedom, and genuine self-belonging. It is a gradual progression, one conscious step after another, one controlled breath at a time. For often the attainment of freedom begins with a seemingly simple yet profound action, to bravely and fearlessly look into the depths of one's being. Do you ever delve into the origin of that critical voice that speaks even when your actions are flawless? It is that very voice that paralyzes decision-making, persistently whispering predictions of failure, despite universal approval from those around you. Sometimes people tend to mistake it for the voice of conscience, at times for an overriding sense of responsibility. But what if this inner critic has a different origin and doesn't belong entirely to you? What if it's just an echo, an internalized image of the mother who raised you, or perhaps the mother who was so absent from your life? The eminent thinker Carl Jung termed this powerful force the inner mother. It is important not to confuse this concept with the image of the biological mother existing in the physical world. In reality, the inner mother represents a complex psychological construct. It is a symbolic image that is imprinted in the earliest years of life and submerged in the depths of the subconscious. Its formation is a consequence of both spoken words and unspoken thoughts. It is also the imprint of all experiences that remained unexpressed. Every gesture, every instance of inattention, every glance, all contribute to its creation. Essentially, it is a kind of mirror in which the personality learned to grasp their identity or understand who they needed to be to earn love, long before their first words were uttered. And here it is, the very moment most people prefer not to confront. The unseen yet powerful inner mother silently orchestrates the emotional lives of many adults. She doesn't shout, argue, or openly manifest. However, it is she who sets the tone, deeply conditions responses, and permeates every choice made. Her influence is felt in all relationships, in every attempt to achieve autonomy, and, more importantly, she sometimes replaces a person's true self. An individual may mistakenly believe they are acting on their own intuition, but it is merely fear transformed by her. It seems that personal morality serves as the driving force, but perhaps it is merely trauma skillfully disguised as moral principles. How many decisions have been postponed or entirely cancelled due to the fear of disappointing expectations that perhaps no longer even exist? How many times has a person silenced themselves, diminished their own significance, shaping themselves not under the pressure of the situation itself, but under the weight of an invisible, unnamed guilt? This intangible burden often becomes an unseen guide. Now, it is worth deeply pondering. When was the last time you felt completely, absolutely yourself, without the slightest fear of being punished, rejected, or abandoned? This is the real question. Have you ever noticed this inner voice? Is it merely an echo of a mother's voice, or is it something far more symbolic, deeper, even more ancient, rooted in the collective unconscious? Let us open this space for shared reflection and sincere dialogue. You might be pleasantly surprised to discover how many people experience similar feelings and face comparable inner challenges. Indeed, the truth is that the inner mother acts as an invisible architect, meticulously constructing a person's life script. However, the key problem is that she invariably writes this script with ink left over from childhood. This internal entity, unfortunately, fails to update her emotional archives. Even if an individual has undergone significant changes, matured, and formed entirely new perspectives and values, she continues to speak using the same emotional logic as a 7-year-old. Such anachronistic persistence proves to be highly destructive. It inevitably traps an individual in a vicious cycle of subservience, overwhelming guilt, paralyzing fear, and profound self-denial. Consider a simple yet illustrative case. A person encounters a magnificent opportunity in their professional life, perhaps a long-awaited promotion, a prestigious invitation, or a unique chance to showcase their exceptional abilities. However, instead of experiencing deserved joy and anticipation, they are overcome by profound doubt and oppressive anxiety. A paralyzing fear emerges, the fear of not being good enough, accompanied by an irresistible urge to retreat. An inexplicable desire to hide takes hold, and the individual cannot grasp the true reason for this state. All external circumstances seem favorable and logical, yet something intangible powerfully holds them back. This something is quite likely the voice of the inner mother. Don't boast, don't go too far, you'll make a mistake, you don't deserve this. Such directives are utterly illogical, they are archetypal in nature. In most cases, the inner mother takes on the guise of an unyielding pursuit of perfection, ruthless self-flagellation, and excessive demands placed upon oneself. One often believes in the necessity of flawless execution in every task, the impermissibility of any mistakes or blunders, and perceives rest as a sign of weakness. Yet behind all these manifestations still lurks an inner child, languishing, awaiting long-sought validation. This child thinks that if they do everything right, perhaps, just perhaps, they will attain the cherished love they always dreamt of. But alas, the desired love never materializes. The reason lies in the fact that the inner mother does not evolve in sync with the individual's personality. She remains frozen, impervious to the passage of time. She replicates the same behavioral patterns, exacerbates existing emotional wounds, and, what's worse, the individual unconsciously continues to appease this internal entity. How often has one encountered circumstances where their reaction to events was excessive and disproportionate, when even a harmless remark could plunge them into a state of utter desolation? When a neutral action provoked an outburst of uncontrolled rage or immersed them in an abyss of profound sadness. Such manifestations serve as undeniable evidence of the inner mother's activation. She takes the reins. She responds to events with long ingrained emotional patterns. This is the fear of being rejected, as well as the oppressive feeling of inadequacy, as if one has once again failed to meet expectations. And here is one of the most challenging aspects to comprehend and accept. Even if the biological mother has passed away, even if one is at a significant distance from her, or if they haven't communicated for many years, the inner mother continues to exist because she requires no physical presence whatsoever. She resides deep within one's psyche, manifests in bodily sensations, in emotional impulses, and the less conscious she remains, the more powerful her influence. Often, individuals try to avoid the influence of certain internal factors. Perhaps they attempt to form a personality diametrically opposed to the maternal figure, or they display excessive independence, shy away from deep emotional connections, or strive for comprehensive perfection in all aspects of life. However, such an escape from the so-called inner mother is akin to trying to outrun one's own shadow. She does not dissolve without a trace, she merely transforms her manifestations. How might one's life be transformed if they could view her without distortion? Not as an antagonist or a terrifying monster, but as an integral part of one's self that needs to be integrated from the past, and if they could discern where their own essence ends and only an echo of her influence begins. It is in this context that the profound process of individuation gains significance. According to Jung's teachings, true healing is achieved not through the complete elimination of the inner mother, but through the formation of a fundamentally new relationship with her. The essence of the approach lies not in aggressive confrontation or an attempt to suppress this figure, but in establishing a dialogue. This implies the ability to speak with her, listen carefully to her, and utter words that have never been spoken before. It is necessary to allow one's current, mature self to interact with this figure, which seems frozen in the past. This process is not a purely theoretical exercise. It is deeply emotional and imbued with symbolic meaning. It requires one's readiness to open up inner spaces for attentive perception. Perhaps it will require allowing memories, images, and feelings that were previously suppressed to emerge. It is akin to unlocking a long-locked door. The traumatized inner child and the frozen maternal figure remain in a state of interrupted dialogue. If one feels that this profound process is beginning to unfold within them, they are invited to share their experience. One can express their thoughts as a suggestion, a personal revelation, or a memory. Sometimes, what one person writes can serve as a mirror in which another finds the necessary reflection for self-discovery. When one begins to make space for their inner voices, they initiate a process of liberation not only for themselves, but also for those around them. Healing, as is known, does not occur in isolation. It is always a collective, even archetypal, phenomenon. There is another profound truth worth noting. The inner mother is not only the entity that passes judgment, she is also capable of silencing, paralyzing, and preventing an individual from truly feeling happy. It is often observed how people, without realizing it, sabotage their own well-being. There arises a feeling as if they have no right to sustained happiness, or that if they allow themselves to fully embrace joy, something bad will inevitably happen. This fundamental distrust of happiness serves as a clear sign of a wounded inner mother. It is she who, through her words or her absence, might have instilled the belief that love is always insufficient, that pleasure harbors danger, that life is full of difficulties, and that vigilance must be constant. As a result, even in bright moments, one lives holding their breath, constantly looking back as if in a rear-view mirror, fearing that everything might collapse. However, such a way of life is tantamount to a slow fading away. And this cycle does not necessarily have to continue. Gradually, one can begin to form a completely new inner image, a kind of symbolic new mother. This is done not to nullify past events or erase the past, but rather to harmonize one's being with the present moment, so that the true voice, buried deep in childhood, can finally be heard. This process of profound internal restructuring begins with small but significant gestures. Examples include a firm and confident no, a pause taken without a trace of guilt, silence met with genuine respect, a tear that was not held back, or a moment when one chooses oneself without offering unnecessary explanations. Each such step, each such action, weakens the dominion of the inner mother and simultaneously strengthens the position of the conscious, mature adult. Over time, life begins to change, not because external circumstances change, but because one stops living in fear of her supposed gaze, stops futilely seeking from her what she could not or would not provide. And here it is, the fundamental truth that few are ready to accept. The inner mother will not dissolve into oblivion, but she is capable of profound transformation. She can cease to be a source of suffering and become an impartial witness. She can learn to respect the new self being born in the present moment, and it is in this that true triumph lies. Victory is not about overcoming one's mother, but about shattering the delusion that her permission is still necessary. In this regard, readers are invited to share their thoughts. What resonated most deeply with them in this part of the text? What idea awakened something profound, hitherto dormant? Sharing opinions and experiences is an integral part of this process, for when one expresses their thoughts, they not only give vent to inner experiences but also illuminate the path for other souls who might be wandering in similar labyrinths of inner darkness. Ultimately, within each person, an inner maternal figure is discovered. However, few possess the courage to look this inner entity in the eye and declare, "From now on, I will take care of myself." Age is irrelevant here. It could be 30, 50, or even 70 years old. One might have raised children, built a successful career, experienced many losses, and found new horizons. Nevertheless, somewhere deep inside, a faint call continues to resonate. This is a profound, almost ancestral echo that invites everyone on a unique inner journey. If one dares to listen to this voice, they will inevitably uncover one of the most painful yet simultaneously liberating truths of human psychology. To finally become oneself, one must symbolically separate from the image of one's own mother. This separation is not a physical act. It is exclusively symbolic and by no means signifies ingratitude, rebellion, or malice. Its essence lies in achieving genuine psychological freedom. This process is closely linked to the concept of individuation, one of the foundational concepts in Carl Jung's teachings, representing a transformation from a conditioned ego to the true self. It is at this moment that one stops living to please others, to strive to fit in or belong, and begins to draw life force from their own deep inner source. However, for one to truly realize themselves, they must break an invisible, age-old and often silent chain, a strong emotional bond rooted in an unresolved mother complex. Why is this process so incredibly difficult? The answer lies in the fact that the child's psyche perceives the act of separation not as a natural stage of development and evolution, but as an existential threat. For the undeveloped consciousness of a child, the rupture of this fundamental bond with the mother is tantamount to complete annihilation, the death of one's own self. After all, she was the primary foundation who provided nourishment, offered love, or, conversely, its painful absence, who served as their first and most crucial emotional mirror. The maternal figure appeared before them as the first world, the primal home, the original deity. And even if her role proved imperfect, or perhaps precisely for this reason, her emotional absence transformed into an even more powerful psychological entity, wielding immense power. This entity shapes one's personality, seemingly protecting them, yet at the same time relentlessly limiting their true potential. As Carl Jung noted, when relationships with the mother remain unprocessed, they keep the child's ego in a state of deep symbiotic fusion with the maternal image. It is within the conditions of this absorbing fusion that there is no space for the genuine birth and development of one's true self. Their entire life begins to revolve around others' expectations and perceptions. This manifests as a constant fear of causing displeasure, an insatiable desire to be seen, accepted, deeply loved, and wholly approved by others. Thus, an adult finds themselves trapped in a script that never truly belonged to them. It is the script of an undeveloped child who, despite the years, still desperately craves recognition and acceptance. Therefore, the process of separating from the so-called inner mother is essentially a kind of death. It is not a physical fading away, but rather a small demise, yet one of extraordinary, almost sacred significance. Imagine the following scene. An elderly woman, 60 years old, sits in a therapist's waiting room. She is not physically exhausted, but her spirit feels deeply weary, and she describes a persistent feeling of inner emptiness. Her entire life she followed prescriptions, trying to do everything right. She was an exemplary daughter, a devoted wife, a caring mother. This woman selflessly dedicated herself to caring for others, neglecting her own desires and needs. She was the pillar of everything around her, but now her children have grown and started their own families, her marriage had settled into silence, and relentless time continues its course. At this moment she asks herself a tormenting question. Who am I, really? And then, with tears in her eyes, almost in a whisper, she says, I never chose myself. I always lived someone else's life. Such a story is far more common than one might assume. According to a 2021 study published by Harvard Medical School, a staggering 74% of women over 50 admitted that their identity was shaped by family expectations. This phenomenon should not be confused with ingratitude or regret for years lived. It is rather a belated, yet absolutely timely, inner calling. It is a call to one's own birth, to the discovery of one's true self from the depths of one's being. However, such a rebirth is inevitably accompanied by pain. Moreover, it demands the complete dismantling of old perceptions of oneself and the world. Carl Gustav Jung, the renowned thinker, asserted that the first stage of human liberation occurs at the moment of physical birth when the body gains independence. However, in his view, there is a second, far deeper emancipation, the liberation of the soul. It is noteworthy that for this second act of emancipation, no external midwife exists. It wholly requires inner courage and determination. For here the discussion is not about simple distancing from the biological parent, but about a fundamental detachment from the internal projections and representations that she symbolizes in one's consciousness. This is liberation from the part of the personality that constantly seeks external approval, from the inner voice that still believes, if one is good enough, they will finally be loved. It is also a separation from the inner essence that continues to exchange one's own truth and authenticity for meager crumbs of external affection. And here is information that might surprise and provoke thought. Research conducted by the Institute for Family Studies convincingly demonstrates that adults who have not undergone a conscious process of psychological separation from their families of origin face a 50% higher risk of developing chronic anxiety disorders than those who have successfully navigated this stage. The explanation lies in a deep internal misalignment, living with an ego tethered to the past, a body functioning in the present, and a soul seemingly in another temporal dimension. This is a state of disharmony. No soul can endure such desynchronization without succumbing to illness or profound suffering. A natural question arises: how is it possible to break this ingrained behavioral pattern? How can one gain freedom from such a deep symbiosis without feeling the oppressive guilt for a perceived betrayal of the person who gave them life? The first and fundamental key to this liberation lies in recognizing and accepting the fact that separation is not rejection or renunciation. On the contrary, it is a manifestation of maturity and personal growth. One does not cease to love their mother, they merely cease to serve the childlike idealized image created in their mind. The soul must consciously relinquish the myth of the ideal, all-encompassing maternal figure to be able to truly love the real woman. And, equally important, it must finally cease searching for this ideal mother in other aspects of their lives, in romantic partners, in superiors, in wise mentors, in authoritative gurus, or even in higher powers, such as God. It often happens that romantic relationships do not work out, despite efforts and a sincere desire for intimacy. The reason is not a lack of desire, but that one is not building a connection with the real person opposite them. Instead, they continue to interact with an internal projection of their mother, whom they perhaps unconsciously hope to finally win over or receive approval from. In such a case, any sign of rejection, even minor criticism or a temporary absence of a partner, can awaken a deep, primal wound. This state can be described as profound enslavement, and it has a precise name in psychology: psychological infantilization. Externally, one may lead a full adult life, possessing status and responsibility, yet on an emotional level they still function as a child awaiting permission to exist. This manifests in characteristic behavioral patterns. One hesitates before expressing their thoughts, sabotages their own endeavors before even attempting them, and often apologizes for their true feelings or desires. The reason for such behavior lies in the fact that an archetypal mother is still actively present in their inner world. She, like an invisible observer, constantly evaluates, judges, and makes demands, thereby shaping the internal dialogue and limiting freedom of self-expression. Nevertheless, a path to liberation exists, and it begins with what the eminent psychologist Carl Gustav Jung called the crossing of the void. This is a special moment when the individual consciously detaches from all external and internal factors, from their own expectations, imposed social roles, and the familiar masks they hide behind. They step onto entirely uncharted territory, a territory devoid of any guarantees, words, or predetermined paths. Here, one is left alone with themselves in what can be called the desert of the soul. It is no surprise that few dare to enter this metaphorical desert. It frightens with its silence, its boundlessness, and the way it mercilessly dismantles everything within a person that is not authentic and true. However, it is precisely in this desert of the soul that genuine freedom is born. In its silence one finds their own unique voice, which was silenced by years of conventions. Here, the all-consuming power of the symbolic mother, which allowed her to control their life, weakens and finally disappears. Often people experience a state known as existential emptiness, when, despite external well-being and fulfilling all social roles, a profound lack of something vitally important is felt internally. Acknowledging and verbalizing such experiences have a healing power, and learning about others' experiences helps one better understand themselves and realize they are not alone in their search. The process of distancing oneself from the internalized maternal figure signifies a fundamental transformation of the ego. According to Carl Gustav Jung's views, the true ego does not strive for dominance or superiority, but rather resides in deep harmony with its true self. This deep self can only manifest when the ego is liberated from the power of outdated images of the past. It ceases to dictate its existence by responding to the internalized voice of the mother, whether in a compulsive desire to earn her approval or in a desperate attempt to distance itself from her influence. At this pivotal moment, a powerful, symbolic image is formed, signifying the birth of a truly mature personality. This internal birth involves neither external observers nor outward celebrations. It is often accompanied by a profound sense of grief. This is grief for an inadequately lived childhood, sorrow for crumbling illusions destined to die, and the bitterness of parting with fantasies that served as a source of hope and reliance for so long. However, following this grief comes a period of liberating emptiness and piercing clarity. Perhaps it is then that the fateful moment arrives when one first gazes into their own reflection and declares, "Now I am myself." In this assertion, there is not a trace of arrogance. On the contrary, it contains profound humility, sincere gratitude, and an unshakable truth. It is at this decisive moment that the individual begins to rewrite their own life story. This story ceases to be a chronicle of an obedient daughter, a responsible provider son, or an exemplary child striving to please everyone. Instead, it becomes a narrative of a soul that finally gains power over itself, clearly defines its personal boundaries, consciously chooses its own path toward light, creates unique rituals, and learns to unconditionally accept itself. But this process holds something far deeper and more encompassing. By undergoing this transformation, one heals not only themselves personally, they heal both the past and the future, breaking chains of negative patterns. They become a conscious and active link in their ancestral lineage, They become the one who breaks the vicious cycle of recurring mistakes and traumas, the one who grants future generations the ability to love freely without the heavy burden of the past. They become the one who is capable of showing care without sacrificing their own well-being, and the one who gains the right to exist without oppressive guilt. The distinguished psychologist Carl Jung asserted that the most valuable gift an individual can offer humanity is the achievement of profound self-awareness. This insight begins at the moment one liberates themselves from the pervasive illusion of an omnipotent maternal figure and comes into harmony with their unique place in the universe. They come into this world not to mindlessly continue the already written history of their ancestors. Rather, their destiny is to bring it to its logical conclusion, crowning it with a worthy finale, and then forge it into a completely new melody of life. And this transformative process begins right now, at the moment one decides not to drag out an existence permeated by the fear of separation. For now, they understand that parting is not a loss, rather it is the harbinger of a new birth. And every genuine birth is, of course, accompanied by pain, yet it always carries a great promise, the promise that beyond suffering lies something that was never taken from them, but merely temporarily forgotten, their own unique soul. One is not born to carry on their shoulders a life that is not their true purpose. They are not born to be merely a reflection of someone else's pain, echoing the suffering of others. Their arrival in the world is not meant to silently reproduce the behavioral patterns of those who raised them, in a futile hope that the very love they always dreamt of will one day materialize. However, the vast majority of people continue this journey unconsciously. They live an existence like shadows of their own unrealized stories, acting as custodians of alien, unfitting memories. They remain mature individuals who, nonetheless, continue to be profoundly impacted emotionally by their mothers, even if those mothers have already passed from this world, their presence still weighing heavily on their descendants' minds. This is the true nature of the mother wound. It is deeply psychological, manifesting quietly, yet penetrating the soul's most hidden corners. Until this wound is brought into the light of consciousness, it not only causes unbearable pain but also holds absolute sway over a person's life. People tend to believe their decisions are dictated solely by their own free will, yet deep within them, unconscious impulses often operate, and yielding to these impulses leads to inevitable defeats. Individuals undermine their own initiatives. They become entangled in complex and sometimes destructive romantic relationships. They repeat scenarios they previously swore to abandon completely. All these patterns arise because a part of them still awaits the fulfillment of long-standing needs, recognition, approval, unconditional love. But unmet attachment cannot be found in past events, and the validation of one's worth, which never arrives, cannot be given by those who are themselves unable to recognize and accept their true essence. The key to resolving this dilemma lies in a different direction. It involves the courage to clearly face the deep psychological imprint left by this wound, and the ability to accurately identify and name the emerging symptoms, for only that which is made conscious and named becomes accessible for transformation. It is then that an individual can grasp the true nature of things. They will understand why certain sufferings return, even when everything seems to be going well. They will realize why some relationships prove destructive and cause pain. They will gain insight into why, despite all their efforts, they continue to feel a burden that doesn't belong to them. These manifestations are not random occurrences. They represent the authentic language of their soul, persistently calling them to freedom. The first sign is an unseen inner voice, tirelessly undermining a person's confidence. Its presence is quiet but constantly felt, like a shadow following every step. This whisper persistently instills thoughts of inadequacy, inevitable mistakes, and the impossibility of achieving desired perfection. The origins of this inner critic often stem from childhood, shaped by maternal views, both those that were truly expressed and those that were deeply longed for. If these views were judgmental, overly critical, or emotionally distant, the individual's psyche registers them as a stable behavioral pattern. As a result, instead of healthy self-acceptance, the person unconsciously begins to self-sabotage from within, becoming a prisoner of their own negative beliefs. The second sign is a deeply rooted fear of achieving genuine autonomy. Something unseen and powerful holds the individual back, even when their deepest desire is to gain freedom, firmly say no, or choose an entirely different path in life. Beneath this feeling often lies a profound, ancestral sense of guilt, an invisible but powerful loyalty to one's forebears. A subconscious thought arises that a full, happy life might be perceived as a form of betrayal to those who gave them existence. History offers many examples of people stopping halfway to their dreams and goals, feeling they had gone too far. They felt they had distanced themselves excessively from familiar norms or expectations, and that true happiness was impossible without some apology or justification for their pursuit of individuality and well-being. The third sign is consistently recurring, sometimes destructive, patterns in relationships with others. Unconsciously, people seem to attract individuals whose behavior remarkably mirrors the traumas and pain points of their own childhood. These might be people who systematically ignore their needs, seek to totally control them, diminish their significance, or conversely are overly protective, literally smothering them with attention. Often such recurring scenarios are mistakenly interpreted as manifestations of an inescapable fate, karmic debt, or mere bad luck. However, as the eminent psychologist Jung would assert, something else is at play. The unconscious seeks compensation. It unconsciously tries to rewrite history. This time, it tries to be seen. Nevertheless, it is crucial to understand that traumatic experiences repeat in life, not to endlessly prolong suffering, but on the contrary, to provide an opportunity for healing. This is possible, of course, only with a deep and conscious understanding of what is happening. The fourth sign manifests as self-censorship. Individuals often face significant difficulties in self-expression, in trusting their inner voice, and in fully revealing themselves to the world. Many people live their lives as if constantly hiding, experiencing an unspoken fear. This is akin to expecting punishment for daring to be too noticeable, to feel too deeply, or to desire too much. Such suppression is a direct legacy of an emotional environment where spontaneity was systematically punished or ignored. In such an atmosphere, being authentic was unsafe, and love often depended on conforming to external expectations. The fifth indicator is an unexplained fatigue. This is not merely physical exhaustion, but a deep weariness without visible cause, accompanied by a deficit of vital energy and emotional apathy. At this point, the body begins to clearly demonstrate the weight of the burden the soul has carried for decades. Carl Jung, a distinguished thinker, warned, "What is not made conscious inevitably manifests as either fate or symptom." Indeed, many emotional, psychological, and even physical ailments are rooted in pain that a person has not bravely confronted. However, the deepest manifestation of the mother wound can be an all-encompassing feeling of not belonging to oneself. This is an unexplained inner emptiness that is extremely difficult to articulate. There is a constant sense that something fundamentally important is missing, regardless of the efforts made. It is akin to feeling as if one is always a step behind their own life. As a result, individuals are constantly searching for a place, a person, or a moment, something that will finally bring them long-awaited peace. Nevertheless, this peace is found not in a vague future, but in the act of reconciling with the past. It lies in the courage to break the destructive cycle and in the vitally important process of emotional detachment from the past that continues to hold one captive. The question of how to resolve accumulated internal conflicts and break established destructive patterns begins with deep awareness. The primary step is the process of naming, that is, identifying the source of the problem. This requires ruthless honesty with oneself, implying an open admission. Yes, this wound exists within me. Yes, it has had a formative influence on my personality. However, I will no longer allow it to dictate my actions or control my life. Such an internal declaration serves as a cornerstone, the first decisive step on the path to achieving genuine freedom. The second stage on this path is allowing oneself to experience the full spectrum of emotions. This includes the ability to grieve, feel anger, immerse oneself in sadness, and experience disappointment. Often individuals suffer from various ailments because they mistakenly believe that respecting parents automatically implies suppressing any negative feelings toward them. However, as the eminent thinker Jung noted, true love can only blossom when emotional detachment occurs. This state is achieved when a person begins to perceive their parents not as infallible deities or terrifying monsters, but as ordinary people endowed with their own imperfections. At such a moment, an individual is able to internally say, "You may have disappointed me. Nevertheless, I consciously choose to free myself from this pain. My decision is dictated not by a desire to harm you, but by the necessity of healing my own soul." The third, and equally significant step is breaking the unspoken contract of silence. This implies actively expressing one's experiences, whether through spoken word, written expression, sharing experiences with trusted individuals, or other forms of self-expression. It is known that pain, like a parasite, feeds on secrets and secrecy. When a person dares to speak, they thereby break the binding spell, stripping pain of its power. At this moment, one's own strength and inner harmony are restored. It is important to note that such an act of expression does not necessarily have to be public. An individual can record their thoughts and feelings in a personal diary, write them in a letter that may never be sent, or embody them in a symbolic ritual. The key aspect is that these emotions and experiences find a way out from the depths of the soul, begin to circulate freely, and finally take tangible form. The fourth stage in this journey of self-discovery and recovery involves forming a new inner connection. This means creating a symbolic image of a new mother, a new reference point that serves as a reliable guide. This vitally important image is not the result of magic or instantaneous insight. It gradually crystallizes through repeated, conscious choices. The path to it lies through daily self-care, through cultivating a more loving and supportive inner voice, and through performing small but significant actions that affirm, "Now I protect myself, now I see myself." Finally, the fifth step implies a fundamental restructuring of existence. This means beginning to live based on one's own inner essence, setting healthy boundaries, forming more harmonious and beneficial relationships, learning to experience joy in life without guilt, allowing oneself to make mistakes without self-destructing, and accepting the complexities of being as an inherent part of the human experience. As Carl Jung aptly remarked, the goal of the therapeutic process is not to fix someone, but to integrate them, because true wholeness only comes when an individual is freed from the chains of pain. Perhaps at this point, a natural question arises, but is this truly feasible? Can a person find freedom after so many years spent under the influence of numerous conditionings after so many past events? The answer to this question is affirmative. Yes, age, personal biography, past experience, none of this is decisive. There is always an opportunity to achieve wholeness. There is always a moment when a person can return to their true essence. The deeper the pain endured, the more powerful and complete the healing process can be. However, one should not expect this path to be linear and predictable. It will unfold in waves, in layers, bringing with it periods when it may seem that everything is returning to its former state, as well as moments of inexplicable relief. It is important to trust this process, to trust one's own inner rhythm, and above all, to trust the deep knowledge already present in every soul. One is born to be oneself, not an extension of someone else's story. Now that this information has been presented, the authors wish to make an offer. If something within the listener or reader has shifted, if some previously dormant part of their being has awakened, then it is time to take concrete action. A practical, profound, and sensitive step-by-step guide will be presented next, which will help apply all the discussed ideas in practice. It will allow one to clearly understand how to begin this path of emotional, symbolic, and spiritual freedom while respecting one's own boundaries and honoring one's past. This is a unique opportunity to move from mere understanding to active transformation. True healing is not the result of magic. It does not happen in a moment of enlightenment or a sudden epiphany in the middle of the night. True healing is a continuous journey. It is a slow, deep, and often painful return to the very center of one's being. It is a path back to those places one learned to avoid, where one was ignored, suppressed, where one was hurt. It is this place that holds not only suffering, but also sacred truth, and it is precisely where the wound opens that the key to true freedom lies. In this discussion, the individual has delved into the deep waters of self-knowledge, identifying hidden wounds and understanding internal dynamics. They have discovered the invisible shadows that have unconsciously controlled their existence for a long time. It has been realized that the mother wound extends far beyond the relationship with the woman who gave life. It impacts deep internal structures, determining one's capacity to love, to react to events, and to simply exist. Now it is time to transform this profound awareness into concrete action. For mere knowledge is not enough. Knowledge must inevitably transition into practical application, and practice, in turn, must become an integral part of daily ritual. The plan presented below is not an ordinary list of tasks. Rather, it is a symbolic map, a collection of living, deeply emotional, and carefully considered strategic steps, the sincere application of which can fundamentally change one's relationship with oneself. This journey highlights 7 key directions. These are 7 specific actions, 7 unbreakable commitments. Each represents a step towards achieving the wholeness of one's soul. The first and most important direction is awareness. This involves the daily practice of mindful self-observation. It is necessary to name what is hidden within. For 1 week, it is recommended to set aside 5 minutes daily to manually write down the phrases that spontaneously arise in one's consciousness. It is important to write without any internal censorship, especially during moments when one feels most vulnerable, experiences guilt, depression, or indecision. Examples of such phrases might include, "I must appear nice. If I do that, I'll be rejected. I mustn't make mistakes. I'll disappoint myself." These formulations are typically reflections of the voice of the so-called inner mother. By bringing them to the level of awareness, a person begins to create a certain space between their true self and these automatic reactions. It is important to remember the fundamental principle: everything that is observed gradually loses its power, whereas that which remains hidden and unconscious continues to dominate. The second step towards harmony involves meeting the inner child, aimed at restoring a once-severed emotional connection. To begin, it is recommended to choose a personal photograph of oneself between the ages of 5 and 9. Then, in complete silence, one should focus their gaze on the eyes of this child for at least 3 minutes, allowing non-verbal contact to be established. After this, one should begin writing a letter to this inner image. In the message, it is important to express everything that, for whatever reason, remained unsaid. One must apologize for previously ignoring one's own self and affirm a firm intention to henceforth be present with this inner child, to support them, and to be a part of their life. This symbolic action possesses not only deep emotional, but also significant transformational potential. It contributes to the restructuring of deep unconscious connections, returning to the inner child the adult whose presence and support they always sincerely awaited. The third stage proposes the practice of energetic detachment, aimed at severing invisible but sometimes binding ties. For 21 days, it is recommended to perform a small but significant symbolic ritual daily. Each evening, just before going to sleep, one should place a hand on their chest and say, either quietly aloud or to oneself, the following affirmation: "Mother, I honor your past, but now I allow myself to live my own life. I release your pain, I release what does not belong to me, and I choose to belong to myself." It is important to perform this practice with maximum sincerity, regardless of initial feelings. Even if no feelings arise in the first few days, or if tears appear on the 2nd day, or if a feeling of anger manifests on the 8th day, one must continue this ritual. This regular practice contributes to a deep reprogramming of the emotional subconscious. Its goal is not to completely sever blood or emotional ties, but to free oneself from destructive dependencies that may hinder a full and independent life. 4. The The path to inner liberation often begins with a deep return to one's own body, which is essentially a process of liberation from the mental prison of the mind. Many deep traumas and unexpressed emotions, such as the mother wound, often manifest and reside in the physical body. Guilt also tends to accumulate and be stored in bodily sensations. Fear, like a heavy burden, settles in every cell, and suppressed expressions of love, finding no outlet, can transform into various ailments and diseases. It is for this reason that a conscious choice of a bodily practice that involves deep listening and full presence in the present moment is so important. This can be an activity such as meditative walking, during which each step is felt with full clarity. The practice of yoga, allowing one to harmonize body and spirit. Free dance, providing an opportunity to express the unsaid, or even simply lying on the floor with closed eyes for 10 minutes when one is completely focused on the sensation of their body's weight. The main thing is to be in genuine contact with one's body. One must listen carefully to its signals, allowing it to express those deep experiences that cannot be put into words. Often, the most sincere and healing tears begin to flow only when the turbulent stream of thoughts in the mind quiets down, opening the way to true feelings. 5. The next step is applying a kind of filter to relationships, which involves a careful analysis of recurring scenarios in interpersonal interactions. One is invited to deeply reflect on their closest connections, whether they are friendships, romantic relationships, or business partnerships. It is important to identify if destructive dynamics are present, such as a desire for suffocating closeness, excessive control, painful emotional dependence, or a constant fear of disappointment. It is also worth considering in how many of these relationships one continues to feel like a child, desperately striving to earn love and approval. As part of this inquiry, it is recommended to write down the names of 3 people with whom one has the most significant connections. Next to each name, formulate the question, "Am I trying to heal my mother in this relationship?" The answer to this question, though it may be quite painful, simultaneously carries powerful liberating potential. For as soon as hidden repetition becomes apparent and conscious, it gradually loses its power and begins to dissolve, opening the way for new, healthier forms of interaction. The 6th step on the path to transformation is a deep reconstruction of the inner mother figure. One is invited to create a new, nurturing space within their own consciousness, capable of supporting them for 14 days. To do this, it is recommended to formulate a phrase of acceptance, the very one that perhaps one longed to hear in childhood. An example of such a phrase might be the affirmation, "Even if you make a mistake, you are valuable. I see you with love. You can rest. I will take care of you." This phrase should be recited regularly while looking at one's reflection in a mirror, or whispered quietly before falling asleep. Such a practice gradually allows for the restructuring of the inner personality and the formation of an entirely new maternal archetype, a figure who does not control but generously nurtures, fully supports, and grants freedom. The 7th, final stage is conscious commitment to one's choice, which implies deep responsibility to oneself. This step represents not a one-time decision, but a daily, renewed act of will. The choice to stop living others' narratives, the choice not to let old wounds define one's life path, the choice not to repeat destructive patterns, the choice not to defend outdated systems at the cost of one's own truth. One must choose active action. They need to choose to clearly define their position. It is important to choose to set personal boundaries. One should choose to voice what previously remained unsaid. It is necessary to choose to be whole, and most importantly, to choose to keep moving forward. This applies even to those moments when pain is felt, or when it seems that no changes are occurring, for the soul transforms in silence, and the unseen needs time to blossom. The proposed plan can be revisited, adapted, and of course made one's own. Only when it is integrated into daily life, into the decision-making process, and into one's own worldview, will it gain true power. And if one feels that additional support is needed to make this process easier, more stable, and deeply rooted in everyday life, there is specially designed material intended to help navigate this journey with greater clarity and resilience. This is not just a dry guide, but rather a friendly, practical, and caring companion that demonstrates step by step how to apply the principles of depth psychology in ordinary life. Through short exercises, targeted reflections, and symbolic practices, it teaches how to transform theoretical knowledge into a sustainable habit and information into genuine freedom. If one feels it is time to stop reproducing old scenarios and start making their own choices, the opportunity to rediscover oneself is open. This path unfolds step by step, breath by breath. If this message has resonated within you, and you are not afraid to look within yourself for deeper meaning, then share it with those who need to hear it. You can share your experience, your insights, or even your pain. Here, everyone's voice will be heard, respected, and most importantly, everyone will remember that their story can be rewritten, starting from this very moment and from within themselves.